Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, our weekly trawl through the murkier elements of the beautiful game that we love so much. My name is Kevin Day, I'm your host, and I'm joined as ever by Kieran Maguire, who is, I'm going to say this straight here and now, the country's number one expert on football finances, and he's actually nodding as I speak, everybody.
Scratching my ear.
He says he's scratching his ear. I recognise body language. He's agreeing that he's a financial football expert. Thank you so much for listening to us in so many numbers and leaving us your reviews on iTunes. It does help us get more attention, and it's clear that there's a lot of people out there who need taking by the hand by Kieran through this, what's becoming clear to my displeasure every week is murky is the only word you can use to describe it, isn't it, really? And again, we're driven by your questions, and so we want to start with a big question this week, and it's one, along with agents' fees, this is a question that is probably the one that most people will ask us most. And again, this is something that you will hear me use the words financial fair play on a very regular basis, and it's quite clear, Kieran, that I don't really know what financial fair play means. I'm in favour of it, clearly, because it sounds like it should be the right thing to do. But how does it work? How does it work in Europe, for example, and in the Premier League and the Champions League? Are there different rules? And is it a level playing field? Because Arsene Wenger famously used to call it financial doping. Basically, he said that the people who did it well were able to disguise it, and in a way that certain people can disguise drugs tests. Let's put it into. So give us a little. I know because we talked about it a little bit last week with QPR, and the response was quite fractious, mainly from other clubs in West London. You may recall that Dr. Gandalf QC, which is my favourite listener's name so far, he tried to be coy about which club we were talking about, but it didn't take a QC or a doctor to work out. It was QPR, to be perfectly honest. So it does infuriate other fans of clubs who, for the most part, see their own club, they think, trying to abide by the rules and regulations, and then you see other clubs get around it. So just give us a little bit of context about what financial fair play is, what it was meant to do, and is it doing it?
Right. Its stated objective at the time was to make the finances of clubs in European football more stable, reduce debt, and to reduce the chances of clubs going bust.
So this was a UEFA initiative?
This was a UEFA. This came from Michel Platini.
Okay.
Behind that...
That wasn't an ironic cough, by the way, in case the lawyer's listening. That was just a yeah. Right.
Behind that was a concern from Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern, Manchester United and so on, that we had upstarts in Europe. We had upstarts, and they were called Chelsea and Manchester City and PSG, who had billionaire owners who have come along from effectively nowhere, and they've bankrolled clubs to break through the glass ceiling, to start to sit at the table that the elite thought was theirs and theirs alone.
So again, this is another theme that we've had over the weeks. This is show 5. I think we've mentioned this every show. Something that looks like it's designed to help out the smaller clubs is in fact self-interest from the bigger clubs.
Yeah, and financial fair play is there to stop another Manchester City, another PSG from being created.
Another Leicester to an extent, as you said last week?
Well, yeah, I mean, Leicester are sort of at the cusp. They've done extremely well, and you know, having seen them recently play that incredible performance at Southampton.
Oh, God, yeah.
You know, they are playing great football, but can they maintain that season by season?
Right.
I think that they've had if you think about the year after they won the Premier League, they actually struggled.
Yeah.
And they sacked Ranieri. So how does financial fair play work? There's two broad methods. The first is what we would refer to as a profit or loss target for clubs, and the second is a wage cap. And those are two different methods of controlling a club's finances. As far as UEFA are concerned, they use this profit and loss approach, and you're allowed to lose no more than 30 million euros over a rolling 3-year period. And UEFA are actually quite strict on that, because AC Milan are currently banned from UEFA competition for going beyond the targets. And in terms of the sanctions they've had in the past, they gave Manchester City and PSG a fine.
Right, okay. Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
Which was partly suspended.
That'll stop them.
And that didn't really financially impact upon those clubs, because they're very wealthy backers. They also put a limit on the squad size for UEFA competition in those seasons.
Right.
That did impact upon those clubs. So there's various ways of achieving this. And
now, that figure you mentioned, the 30 million, did that where's the distinction between earnings and money given to you by owner? Right.
If the owner puts money into the club, some of that is allowed to contribute towards the 30 million. So the owners are allowed to effectively put 25 million of that 30 million over the 3 seasons.
Right. Oh, okay.
But if they put more than that, they can do that, but it doesn't count for FFP.
Right. Okay.
Yep. So that's sort of the profit approach, and that's also the approach that we've got in the Premier League. But the Premier League say you can lose 105 million quid over 3 years. Now, to achieve that's going to be one hell of an achievement. You think about all the money in the Premier League. So the Premier League FFP sanctions aren't particularly severe. They did have a wage cap in the Premier League, but nobody knew about it apart from the club owners. And what happened this summer was that the club owners agreed to scrap that wage cap. Which is good news for Steve Parish.
Well, do you see, this makes sense. I have mentioned this before, because Steve Parish has talked in the past about Palace being one of the clubs. Yeah, when at forums, for example, in meetings, when we've talked about not getting players that we were involved with or apparently interested in, he's talked about us complying with financial fair play regulations, and then always gets a little sheepish when we say, well, we seem to be the only club do it. So I didn't know. Well, as it turned out, no one knew there was a wage cap.
Yeah, it was called STCC, short-term cost control, and what you were allowed to do is that you were only allowed to increase your wage bill by £7 million a year.
Right. Okay.
Plus any money that you earned yourself through player sales, increased commercial deals, increased match day money, and so on.
That makes perfect sense as a Palace fan, because I know for a fact that our annual wage bill was fairly low until Kabai came in, and then Benteke came in, and then the players that were already there wanted. So that would make perfect sense in terms of the fact that our wage bill suddenly spiraled to a level that we'd never seen before. So that would make sense. But that wage cap is gone now.
That wage cap that was for reasons which have never been communicated. That was abolished for this season onwards. So that in theory,
well, maybe if no one knew about it, maybe they thought they didn't need to tell us it wasn't there anymore.
Well, nobody will talk about it because you don't think of clubs in the Premier League as being
fair point.
Suffering financially.
Yes, fair point.
So that also operated in the Championship, and as we know, Birmingham City got a 9-point deduction last season for breaking FFP. Yeah. They were paying £202 in wages for every £100 that came through the door, which is not a very good way to run a business. But should football be a business? The romantic in us says, who cares?
Yeah.
And also, I think from a fan's point of view, if a billionaire comes along and if he wants to pay a huge amount of money to players for wages, well, I don't care if it's my club. You talk to a Chelsea fan.
Yep.
Do they moan that Abramovich has underwritten £1 billion worth of losses, and it's the same at Manchester City?
Yeah.
I say, look at the trophy cabinet, look at the football we're playing, look at the fact that we're playing in Europe every season.
Yeah.
So from a fan's point of view, we're not bothered.
Yeah.
The billionaire isn't bothered because a football club's a trophy asset.
Yeah.
If you think about it, you've got the helicopter, you've got the yacht, you've got a couple of private islands, you've got some Jackson Pollock paintings.
Yeah.
What else do you want? Well, football club gives you recognition that you've never had before because you've got 50,000 people chanting your name and cheering you to the rafters every week. So football clubs are very, very attractive asset for a rich person.
We've seen with Leicester City how close the relationship can be with an owner who buys a club and buys into the ethos of the club as well. Because I think it's fair with Man City as well, because Man City fans will see the economic effect it's had on East Manchester. So it's not always a one-way take basis, is it?
Yeah.
So, but it is, as you say, it's a shortcut into a global brand.
And they've benefited from it. You know,
Right.
Chelsea and Manchester City both now break even. Yeah, they've stopped making losses as such. And their owners would say, we had to lose that. We had, in order to get from step 1 to step 6, we had to go up the elevator very, very quickly.
And is their transfer embargo, Chelsea, is that anything to do with financial fair play, or is that...
No, that's all to do with the recruitment of
Right, so
of
that would be a
players.
different
Yeah.
pod, because I'm to be honest, I know I'm the professional idiot on this, but this is the first time when I'm actually genuinely having to digest what you're saying, because it's such a big issue and the numbers are so big. So is it working? Does it work, financial fair? I mean, what are the financial fair play rules outside the Premier League and the rest of English football then? Does the EFL have their own separate financial fair play?
The EFL have their own rules. So in the EFL, you're allowed to lose 39 million over 3 seasons, but you get slightly different rules if you've been relegated from the Premier League. So the numbers vary from.
So would that be the same for a club at the bottom of League Two as it would be for a club at the top of the Championship then?
No, it's for the Championship only. It's 39 million.
Oh, okay, right.
And then in League One and League Two, you've got wage caps. So in League One, you're not allowed to spend more than 60% of your income on wages, and in League Two, it's 50%.
Right.
But there's bits and pieces around there which make things a bit more messy.
Well, I don't know. We will be coming back to financial fair play probably in a minute, but certainly. But on the players' wages, again, this is something that many people. It's one of those general questions. So, do football fans? Do I pay Palace players' wages? Do you pay Brighton? Because whatever you're paying Brighton players, it's too much, clearly. But I mean, how much of the players' wages is coming from fans? Because not a game goes by without somebody shouting at Christian Benteke, "Come on, mate, I'll pay your wages." So, is that true?
At the start of the Premier League in 1992-93, the answer was yes. The fans were paying £92 out of every 100 that were being paid out in wages. This season, it's 23 overall in the Premier League, and for Palace, it's £9. So wages have just gone up and up and up. Match day prices, I know we think that they're extortionate, and lots of people would like them to be lower. But if you think about it, your season ticket probably hasn't gone up significantly in the last few years. Manchester United have kept their season ticket prices frozen
as we discussed,
for the last 8 years. So clubs are not squeezing the fans in terms of the matchday ticket. So you're not paying those wages to the same extent as before. The armchair fan is, because the broadcasting rights are actually taking up so much more.
Well, also on season tickets as well, Palace, like many clubs, are spreading the cost, so you can pay in instalments as well. So that's a very fair point. So essentially a Premier League club could play in front of an empty stadium and it really wouldn't affect their income too much.
Yeah, we did a study last year. I think BBC did a study, and they worked out that I think of the 20 clubs in the Premier League, 11 of them could charge nothing for tickets, and the clubs would still make a profit.
So, but then presumably when you've got a club like Bournemouth who get 9,000 people in, that figure's even less.
Yeah, it's down to 4. They pay. Bournemouth fans pay £4 out of every £100.
And where would Bournemouth's wages be ballpark compared to other Premier League teams? Because presumably they still have to attract players to Bournemouth, don't they? And they've got some decent players there.
Their wage bill is pretty high. It's £102 million. Yeah, the average in the Premier League is around about 110. So
a club that gets 9,000, 10,000 people in can afford that wage bill.
Yeah, because fans. Matchday income is not a driver of overall income.
And that change has happened in...
That's happened over the existence of the Premier League, because what we have seen is that the amount that we're paying for our TV subscriptions has gone up faster and faster It's far exceeded inflation, and we keep coming back and we keep renewing. We keep on pressing that button because whether you like it or not, in terms of whether you like BT and Sky, they do put on a very good product.
Yeah,
and it's.
And how, while we're talking about this subject, and again, it shows how easily you can get sidetracked on this. I'm currently doing a show called Back of the Net for Amazon, which people aren't subscribing to. But how has Amazon skewered football finances, broadcasting finances, because they've got 20 games, they've got all the Boxing Day games, haven't they, including, disgracefully, moving Leicester Man United to 8 o'clock on a Boxing Day evening. And interestingly, I know the people who are resenting, they're not happy it's been moved to 8 o'clock on a Boxing Day evening either. But what have they done to the broadcasting finances, Amazon?
They've got the best bargain of anybody, because the understanding is that they actually paid a pretty low fee compared to both BT and Sky.
Is that so?
Because the Premier League want to try something slightly new. And because they want to, in the next round of negotiation, they can say to both Sky and BT, well, Amazon are already here. They could go and increase their involvement.
And presumably Amazon could buy and sell BT and Sky, couldn't they, with the money they've got?
Oh, Amazon can. Yeah, Amazon are potentially huge. They've got the capacity to blow people out of the water. But from Amazon's point of view, I think it's actually, you look at it from a business perspective, it's really smart. Amazon's sale starts on Boxing Day.
Yeah.
You can sign up for Amazon Prime for 30 days for free on Boxing Day. So you're thinking, well, I'm a football fan. I could watch over the course of the next 48 hours.
Yeah.
I could watch 6 or 7 fixtures for nothing. And then at the end of the 30 days, you've bought a few things from Amazon. You think, well, this Amazon Prime thing's pretty good. And you press your renew button, and they've got you.
Right.
So it's a very, very smart approach from their point of view.
Have they signed a long-term... If it doesn't work as a business model this year, if for example, football fans were to say, I'm not happy with the way they've moved the fixtures about, and there's also a chance that families will say, we don't want you watching football all day Boxing Day, is there a chance that it won't work as a business model? And if it doesn't, will Amazon say, well, we're not that interested in football, full stop, we'll move on to something else? Or are they in it for the long...
They've signed a 3-year deal.
It's 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. All right, so back to financial fair play, because again, TV broadcasting rights is another whole podcast coming up. Does financial fair play work then? Is it doing what it set out to do? Because it clearly hasn't stopped, as you say, if the aim was to stop the upstarts, the PSGs and the Man Cities, apart from the fact they haven't won the Champions League, it's not stopped those clubs pretty much dominating football in their own countries, Liverpool notwithstanding.
UEFA argue that it has been successful because the level of debt in European football has fallen. I would argue that that's an irrelevance because Manchester City and PSG, two clubs who have been penalised by UEFA, they've not got any debt. So why are they being targeted? Spurs now owe 600 or 700 million. Manchester United owe 500 million. Liverpool have expanded their stadium; they owe more money. But these are all very successful clubs. Debt is not a problem. It's paying your instalments is the problem.
Right. So, but there's no distinction between owing money to another club for transfer fees, for example, and owning a lot of money for your new ground. So is that all part of the?
And as far as FFP is concerned, no, there's no difference. And what we are seeing as far as transfer fees is concerned is that more and more clubs are paying in instalments. We've seen with Aaron Wan-Bissaka.
Yes.
Palace last week, they were still owed £22.5 million from United, and they went to the bank and said, look, we've got this IOU from United, and the bank says, well, you give us the IOU, we'll give you the money.
That's amortising, is that?
Yeah,
is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Pretty much. I learnt that word from you. Well, the Wan-Bissaka thing is quite interesting because most people, including the media, led everyone to believe that United had paid pretty much up front. So, but you say that's never going to happen again for most transfers above 40, 50 million, isn't it?
Well, even for a big, a giant club, United, Barcelona, and so on, how many people actually have the capacity to go to their bank and write out a cheque for 50 or 60 million pounds.
Yeah,
and remember, United at the end of 2018, they already owed 258 million pounds to lots of other clubs for lots of other transfers. So, if they go and pay Palace the full amount, the other Everton are going to say, well, hold on.
Of course.
You're paying us over 3 years.
Right, of course.
So, I think it would cause ructions. And regardless of people's opinion of Manchester United, they are a very, very professionally run operation. And they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't screw over one club to benefit another, because that's not the way they do business.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, because Steve Parish, for example, has always said that in their dealings with both Wan-Bissaka and Zaha earlier on, that United were honourable, was the word that he used, but that they were very easy and decent to deal with, and could have used their considerable financial clout to drive us down, but didn't do that. But that's a story for another day. This is going to seem like a more seamless link than it was planned to be, because we mentioned Wan-Bissaka. Our producer, who's currently enjoying a brief Scottish holiday, is a massive Man United fan, so he's thrown this in as a question about another young Man United star, Jesse Lingard. Basically, what's he up to? Is what he's put. Jesse Lingard's got other business stuff going on. Is that so?
Yeah, well, you and I, Kevin, we're both of a similar age. But we're still down with the kids.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse Lingard has he's set up a company called J Lin's.
Of course he has.
And it's selling hoodies, and it's selling street gear, and it's losing a load of money.
Oh, really?
And it's not had a very successful. No, it could be. Startup companies lose money, but he's lost 200 grand in his first few months of trading in terms of that company. And I think that's actually introduces us to a broader issue. Are footballers good at running businesses? Do they have business acumen? Gary Neville is actually very successful. One Matter in Manchester, he's got a fantastic restaurant. Pep's got a fantastic restaurant as well. Some of them are very good, but 40% of professional footballers, will end up bankrupt.
How many?
40%, and that's comes from the PFA, because
in English football.
In English football.
That. From when? Like from players playing now?
That was, I think, came out. I think it was a 2018 report, because we think of professional footballers earning huge sums of money.
40%.
40%. But what are they doing with the money? Look what happened to Paul Merson.
Yeah.
Look what's happened to David James.
Yeah.
Look what's happened to Dieter Mann and other players. They've become sidetracked by other issues. And I think if we get the opportunity, perhaps we ought to get somebody from Sporting Chance or somebody like that to go and talk about the issues surrounding football and gambling, which is an industries which are too closely linked, I think, for comfort.
Again, this is another pod issue. The amount I'm never comfortable with Palace being sponsored by betting companies, to be perfectly honest. And you're right, gambling. And also, I mean, we know that footballers have been badly advised in the past with various tax schemes, investing in movies that haven't worked, and HMRC will inevitably catch up with them. But with the Jesse Lingard thing, your initial thought is £200,000 not a lot of money, but of course it is for a professional footballer. £200,000 is a lot of money. So clubs, you'd think, would be worried about. If he's not sleeping at night worrying about his business, he's not going to be playing football or training well, is he?
That's right. And if you do talk to footballers, they have the same concerns as us, and they do lose form because they're worried about money. They're not to the same extent as other people do. But if you talk to a lower league footballer who's on far less money than the Premier League, and when we're all completely skewed in our opinion.
Yes.
We all think they're all earning tens of thousands of pounds a week. They are not. And lower league players who are on 1 or 2 year contracts, who are retiring at 31 and 32, and then they're looking forward to what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And are they being advised correctly? Because a lot of the time they're relying on agents and advisors and so on who disappear the minute their careers finish.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honey Crisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
I think one of the things that football really needs to look at the most is the way it handles footballers retiring and the way it handles telling 15, 16-year-old kids they're not getting professional contracts.
Absolutely.
Because until 5-6 years ago, both groups of players were pretty much waved goodbye to. I remember Neil Ruddock saying that he had a toothache 2 days after leaving his last club and didn't know what to do. Didn't know how to deal with having a toothache, because until 2 days before, he would have phoned the club, they would have sent the car, would have taken him to the dentist, the pain would have stopped. And now, but again, that's an issue for another pod. There's also, I need to move on to questions. There's a question I'm going to hold over because it's a very good question, but it's about who you think are the most financially effective and least financially effective clubs in the league according to turnover. But it strikes me as being quite a big question. But I do want to get this in particular. This is from Mark Jones, who's a Bangor City fan, and it's off the back of last week's discussion about agents' fees. And again, if you were listening last week, we are still in negotiations with an agent to come on and talk to us on this pod. He's talking about the Pogba fee that you mentioned in particular. Juventus, remind us of what the figure was for the transfer. It was
26 million euros
on a transfer fee of
94, 95 million.
So his question is, how much of that would Paul Pogba have got? He's the asset. Would some of that money go back to Pogba, or is Pogba getting a percentage of what's the 70 million that's left after the agent fee?
I think there will be an arrangement between Paul Pogba, but it's a private arrangement between him and his agent. He will also potentially have got a settlement from Juventus. He'll also potentially get a signing-on fee from Manchester United. So, and that signing-on fee would be spread over the life of his contract. So there's lots of ways, and again, here we need to be speaking to the agents. So there's lots of ways of remunerating players in respect of a transfer. And I think the saddest thing, you were talking about the start and the end of footballers' careers. Footballers are not footballers; they are commodities.
Well, that's awful to hear.
And it's a horrible word.
I know.
But that is how they are seen. And I know some football clubs who talk about having an investments department, not a recruitment player. And they're using the words of the world of finance. These are young men. These are brothers and sons and friends and so on. And I do think that there is a duty of care with the players who don't make the grade, or the players who retire early, or the players who do suffer from anxiety and get distracted by betting and other forms of. If you're young and you're surrounded by all of this, and is the game doing enough? Well, there's too many sad stories that we're seeing. Yeah,
well, it's not just betting; it's a relationship with alcohol and all sorts of other things. Before we move on to the last question, the one great pub fact I've always convinced is: do we talk about the proportion of a transfer fee that a player gets? And again, this is one of those things. You always say, "Well, it's 10%." But I don't know why I've got that in my head, but I've always said whenever a player gets a big transfer fee, 10% of that's a lot of money. Was that ever a case? Has that percolated through for a reason?
Historically, it used to be that if a player did not request a transfer, he would get 5 or 10% of the sale proceeds. Right. That has now disappeared as a right. Right. Certainly, it's something that could be negotiated. But there is no definitive arrangement between players and clubs. I think it was a rule of the PFA, but that has gone now for some time.
All right, now we've got a little bit of time left, but this question is going to take that little bit of time. It's a very heartfelt question from a Notts County fan, Joseph Garner. Thank you for the question, Joseph. Thank you to everybody who sends questions in. As I say, if we don't talk about them, Kieran will try and answer them on email or Twitter. Again, this is another phrase that comes up. Is the fit and proper test fit and proper? Right. Or is it simply impossible to stop rogue owners if they want to be associated? And again, the fit and proper test always... the Premier, you very rarely hear it mentioned in Premier League club context, do you? It's nearly always, unfortunately, League One, League Two and Championship clubs. So I'm going to throw that question over to you, basically.
Right. It's now called the owners and directors test. And what it's looking at is, are you deemed to be an appropriate person to be an owner or a director of a football club? The reason why you don't hear about it in the Premier League is actually to get a deal through via the Premier League. It's going to cost you 100, 200, £2 billion, and that's going to take a lot of time. So that gives the Premier League a lot of time for them to do their homework.
Oh, so for example, if the consortium were to take over or to bid for Newcastle United, that process is going to take.
That's right.
A minimum 3 months, 6 months.
Yeah, and therefore the Premier League, once the application goes through, then Mike Ashley would have to notify the Premier League, and it would allow them to do their due diligence.
And does everyone, if there is a consortium, for example, does everyone in that consortium get checked, or is it just the named person who is?
It's the owner. So the owner could be the person who is underwriting it all, and the board of directors who are being appointed.
Right. I don't like the word owner being used about football clubs. No. So NFL, isn't it? Look,
and the concern is, especially if they are American owners, they see it as a franchise that they are acquiring.
So in the Premier League, are there ways? If for example, Hank Williams, American billionaire, turns up, wants to buy Newcastle, the Premier League do due diligence on Hank Williams and his board of directors, and that's all fine. And then the day after the deal's done, he brings another money man in to sit on. Is he able to do that once the club is his? Can he then bring who he wants in to help?
Everybody involved with the club would have to satisfy. So a new person being involved.
So it's ongoing.
That's right.
Right. Okay. That's slightly reassuring.
Yeah. So. I think the issue that we've seen in respect of Bolton Wanderers and Bury Football Club is that in both of those circumstances, the existing owner had washed their hands of the club, and they sold. Bury and Bolton were both sold effectively for £1.
Yeah.
And then the phone call went through to the EFL. We've sold the club. Sort yourself out. Now,
so there's no onus on the current owner to do due diligence. It's easier said than done. It's due diligence.
No, because if you think about it, if you're selling something for £1, the last thing you're going to do is employ lawyers to investigate the person to what you're selling £1 for.
Fair point.
I think the owners and directors test is fundamentally weak, because all that it says is, do you have an outstanding conviction, an unspent conviction? Now, under the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, which is appropriate, I fully understand that. You can understand that it's a legal minefield for the EFL or the Premier League to get involved. If we take a look at the scenario of...
I'm an ex-human resources manager, so we should maybe explain for people who don't know about the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act that after, it used to be 5 years, the conviction was spent, you don't have to tell anybody about it. It's probably changed now, but after a certain time, if you've been convicted of a crime, you don't have to report that to potential employers. So
yep.
That's what you're talking about in that
that's right.
situation.
If we take a look at the situation of Bolton Wanderers...
Yeah.
The existing owner, he was getting old, he wasn't well, he'd loved the club, he'd put a huge amount, he put £175 million in the club.
Made them very successful.
And everybody had benefited from that. He then sold the club to a guy who had previously been banned from being a director of any company in the UK for 8 years.
Any company?
Any company. So that's quite a severe sanction. Under those circumstances, even if rehabilitation, and I understand the principles behind that, that's perfectly fine. Why didn't the EFL say, okay, you've given us a fait accompli, we're going to put somebody alongside you because we're concerned about your ability to run the business? So they could have quite simply said, we feel that you need some form of assistance just to monitor the decision making, just to monitor that the bills are being paid and things of this nature. But they chose to instead say, it's your club, it's your company, do what you want. And that's how Bolton, Bury got to midnight, Bolton were at 11:59 p.m, weren't they?
But for all that you said about the previous, there is a degree of irresponsibility in an owner selling a club to somebody who's had those sanctions imposed on him, isn't there? And did the EFL, were they aware that these sanctions were imposed on him, but they could do nothing about it until he actually owned the club?
Yep.
So there's no point having a fit and proper person test then, is there?
Well, if you're wearing a tag, then that's one on your ankle rather than one around your wrist. If you're wearing a tag, then you can't go and buy a football club.
I'm a comedian. I don't like laughing at other people. You realise that, don't you? So it's almost impossible to fail a fit and proper, because essentially then, if Hank Williams knew it was by Newcastle, knew that he would not pass a fit and proper person test, he just gets his mate in to be the front man of the club.
You get a nominee in. Yeah.
So it's not difficult to get around this rule, is it?
No, and it then gets very messy. If you look to see what happened with Leeds United, their previous owner before the present one, Chilino, he had a weird relationship with VAT on yachts in...
Yes.
And then for a period of time, the EFL said, you're no longer the owner. But he still seemed to be doing what he wanted to do indirectly. So it's very messy, murky. The lawyers get involved, and there's... I do feel some degree of sympathy for the EFL, because they are given a fait accompli a lot of the time.
Well, also, I presume the EFL's logic is that if we make it tougher to buy clubs, more clubs will go to the wall, essentially.
Yeah.
But that's a kind of... well, I suppose if your club's the one being saved, then it's not a short-term...
And I think we've also got to ask the fundamental... People talk about the EFL, but who is the EFL?
The clubs.
It's the club owners.
Yes.
The club owners going to vote for rules which are going to make it more difficult for them to sell the club when they want to move out?
I think that's an interesting point to make, because people listening to this I'm sure will know, but there are people who won't know. The Premier League simply consists of the 20 clubs that are in the Premier League.
It's just a members-only club.
Which is strange, because you kind of think it must be like the FA, that you've got a full-time staff, or like the civil service, you've got a full-time staff that run the Premier League, and you just become a temporary member of it for however long you're in there. But that's not the case. So it's self-interest. The Premier League is always going to act in self-interest, which again we saw with... goes right back to our very first pod when we're talking about Bury, and I'm asking you why clubs are not doing the honourable thing and helping Bury out, and you basically, it's turkeys voting for Christmas is what you're saying.
And we've also seen in the northwest where I live, Bill Kenwright, the previous owner, or previous major shareholder in Everton Football Club. He sold his shares, but he's still a director of Everton. He offered £1 million to Bury as a gift to try to save the club,
because he is one of the most honourable men in football, as everyone knows.
Yep.
Essentially.
And the EFL turned around and said thanks but no thanks.
What?
They rejected his offer, because under rule, and I've learnt this one off by heart, under EFL rule 105.2.5, as we all know well, you are not allowed to gift money to another club if you're involved at board level with a club in the Premier League.
What's the logic of that rule?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I guess you can say that you might have you might be able to recruit youth players and so on, and abuse the position. But then,
do you know what? If I was a Bury fan, I'd say you can have the first pick of all our youth players. Yeah. But essentially, I didn't know that. That's wrong of the EFL. Isn't it?
It seems intuitively wrong, especially as they say, well, you can't gift us £1 million. Where do Bury train? Bury train at Carrington, which is owned by Manchester City. Now, Manchester City moved to a new training facility, and they said to Bury, look, we know your skin, we know you got trouble. You can use our training facilities as long as you mow the grass.
Brilliant.
You can use our training facilities for nothing.
Right.
Because we're good guys, and
and
City is East Manchester, and Bury's not that far away, and they always have had a decent relationship themselves. So if City can gift them the use of training facilities, why can't Bill Kenwright gift £1 million?
Yeah, and I'm sure, I'm no tax expert, but I'm sure HMRC would find a way. I mean, that's a gift in kind. That's the same as giving them money, isn't it? That's. I'm trying to think of a way of not ending this pod on a depressing note, but that's. I didn't realise that at the time. So that option to save Bury. And it would have saved Bury. That option was there, or at least given them a stay of execution.
It would have given a stay of execution, potentially. The thing it would not have addressed is Steve Dale, is still in charge of Bury.
Well, this again makes a nonsense of the fit and proper person test, because you've got Steve Daly still in charge of Bury, whatever Bury is as an entity now, and you've got Bill Kenwright, who would pass any fit and proper person test in football, not being allowed to rectify a situation caused by a person who probably wouldn't. So, well, at least we've answered the question. Right. What is a fit and proper person test, and is it fit and proper? It's not, is it? It's not fit for purpose. I mean, do you think that will change in future? Or
Well, the EFL presently have a QC who's going through the fine print. But if it is a very objective test, if it's very much a rule, then rules for every, as my law lecturer at university once said to me, for every rule there's a loophole.
Well, if you've got money, there is. Yep. I think it's the cynical answer to end this pod, which has taken a cynical note. But unfortunately, the price of football is sometimes going to be high, isn't it? So we can't pretend that it's going to be a jolly subject that we can get out of each week. So, unless, of course, Becky has cooked you another meal like last week. The shout-out I had to give to people cooking you meals last week.
It's the only way I can get food these days.
Is it? Oh, dear. If anybody out there wants to cook meals for Kieran, by all means, send questions and recipes. We'll accept all those. This has been a Dap Dip production recorded at Soho Radio Studios in the heart of central London. Thank you for your feedback and reviews. As I semi-pleaded last week, and I don't like having to do this, if you could give us more reviews at iTunes, that would be great. It does help us in the Apple charts, which we're doing well in, thank you already. It helps with algorithms, whatever they are. I don't know, I'm not a doctor. So just say what you like, as long as it's nice. As long as you've got 5 stars, you can put what you want. You can say, I'm not going to be reading them, but I'll be finding out about the 5 stars from Guy. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with more from The Price of Football.